The Princess's Curse. The stars above the Empire's capital world burned like cold diamonds, silent and distant. Inside the Crystal Palace, Princess Serena walked alone across the wide silver halls. Her steps echoed, but her heart felt heavier than the crown she wore. To her people, she was a symbol of beauty, wisdom, and strength. But deep inside, she carried a secret that poisoned every smile. She believed she could never give life, never bear a child, never give her empire an heir. From the day she was young, whispers followed her. Servants bowed low but muttered behind her back. Cursed, they said, she carries the blood of the stars, but it is barren. Some said the gods had punished her family. Others said an old rival house had placed a curse before their fall. No one knew the truth, but everyone loved the gossip. Even her own council treated her with hidden pity. And her enemies, oh, they waited like wolves in the dark. What is a queen with no heir? They whispered. What is a throne with no future? Serena never showed her pain. In public, her voice was calm, her eyes bright, her posture flawless. But when the palace halls were empty, she let her mask slip. She would stand before the mirror, looking at her reflection. The silver hair, the glowing violet eyes, the flawless skin, and she would hate it. How could something so perfect still be broken? How could the universe give her everything except the one thing she wanted most? Every night, she prayed to the stars. Not for power, not for victory, not for wealth. She prayed for one simple gift, a child, someone who could call her mother, someone who could carry her empire forward. But the stars never answered, and the silence of the heavens was louder than any battle horn. As the years passed, the pressure grew. The council began to push her toward political marriages. Princes, generals, warlords, men who wanted her throne more than her heart. She rejected them all, hiding behind diplomacy and strategy. But she knew the truth. Even if she married, she could not give them what they wanted. And one day, one of them might kill her for it. Still, Serena fought for her people. She won battles in space. She signed treaties that saved worlds. Her empire thrived, but every victory was shadowed by the same fear. What happens when I am gone? Who will protect them after me? The curse was not only in her body. It was in her mind. Every smile she gave her people, every speech to her army, every celebration of triumph, it all felt hollow because deep inside she thought, it doesn't matter. I have no future. I am the last of my line. Yet Serena never allowed her despair to show. For the galaxy was cruel, and weakness was blood in the water. She trained harder, fought fiercer, and kept her secret buried beneath layers of steel. But even the strongest armor has cracks. And sometimes, late at night, when no one was watching, she pressed her hand to her belly and whispered, "Why not me? Why am I cursed?" Her enemies grew bold. Rebel factions rose. Foreign fleets circled her borders. They believed time was on their side. They believed the cursed princess would fall. Without an heir, without a future, her empire would crumble. They only had to wait. And then, the throne would be theirs. But Serena was not weak. Even cursed, she burned brighter than any star in her empire. She vowed that if she could not give life, then she would give protection. If she could not bring a child into the world, she would keep her people safe until her last breath. It was a promise written in blood and fire. Still, the silence of her chambers haunted her. At night, she dreamed of a child's laughter, a small hand reaching for hers, a future where she was not alone. But every morning, she woke to emptiness, and the curse sat heavier on her shoulders. Then one night, as the empire faced new danger, a messenger ran into her throne room with trembling hands. A human had been captured on the edge of her territory, a creature from a young and fragile species. To most of her people, humans were nothing, soft, weak, unimportant, but Serena's eyes narrowed. For some reason, her heart stirred. She did not know why. She only knew this human would change everything. Her curse, her throne, her destiny. Nothing would ever be the same again. The human encounter. The cell doors hissed open with a cold metallic sound. Princess Serenia entered with the calm grace of a queen, but her eyes burned with curiosity. Before her, under the dim blue light, sat the human. Chains bound his wrists, his armor torn, his face marked with dirt and blood. Yet his eyes, clear, sharp, defiant, met hers without fear. Serenia studied him like a puzzle. She had seen many warriors, many enemies, many slaves, but never had she seen a human this close. His kind were new to the galaxy, barely reaching the stars. To most, they were nothing but fragile creatures from a small blue world. Yet this one sat straight despite his wounds, like a soldier who refused to bow. "What is your name?" Serenia's voice was smooth, commanding. The human hesitated, then answered, "Captain Elias Kane, Earth Defense." His accent was strange, his words clipped but steady. He did not beg, he did not tremble. He simply looked at her, as if he were her equal. Her guards shifted nervously. One of them whispered, "My princess, he is dangerous. Let's end him." But Serenia raised her hand. "No," she said firmly, never breaking eye contact with Elias. "There is something different here." The human smirked faintly. "Funny," he muttered. "I was about to say the same about you." The guards bristled at his tone. How dare a prisoner speak so boldly? But Serenia felt a spark. Strange, unsettling, almost exciting. She dismissed the guards with a gesture. Now it was only her and the human in the chamber. For a long moment, they sat in silence, the air thick with unspoken questions. "Do you know where you are, Captain?" Serenia asked. Elias tilted his head. "Judging by the shiny walls and the unfriendly welcome, I'd say in the hands of royalty." His sarcasm would have earned punishment from anyone else. But Serenia almost smiled. "Almost. You stand in the heart of the Varen Empire," she said, her voice proud. "An empire older than your species' first sparks of fire." Elias raised an eyebrow. "Impressive," he said flatly. "But if you're trying to scare me, princess, you'll need to try harder." The word princess lingered in the air. No prisoner had ever dared to say it so casually. Yet instead of anger, Serenia felt something stir in her chest. This man was reckless, yes, but he was not afraid of her, and that made him different. She leaned closer, studying him. "Tell me, Captain, why did you cross into my space?" Elias exhaled slowly, his jaw tightening. "We were chasing raiders," he said. "They attacked one of our colonies. My ship followed them. We didn't know this was your territory." There was no weakness in his voice, only truth. Serenia knew lies. She had heard them all her life. But this was not a lie. She folded her hands behind her back, pacing slowly. Her thoughts tangled like storm clouds. Why did her heart race? Why did she feel as if fate itself had brought this fragile creature before her? It was absurd. He was human, unimportant beneath her. "And yet, you are far from home, human," she said. "And yet you speak to me as if you fear nothing." Elias looked at her with steady eyes. "Maybe because I've already lost too much to be afraid." The weight of his words hung heavy. For a moment, Serenia saw not a soldier, not a prisoner, but a man carrying grief. Something about it mirrored her own hidden pain. A sudden alarm blared across the palace. Her communicator flashed red. A fleet was approaching. The enemy had come sooner than expected. Her guards rushed back inside. "My princess, the enemy strikes at the outer colonies." Serenia turned, her mind sharp as a blade. But before she could speak, Elias called out. "You're under attack," he said, his voice urgent. "I know these raiders. I've fought them before. I can help you." The guards laughed bitterly. A prisoner helped the princess? Absurd. But Serenia did not laugh. Her violet eyes locked onto Elias once more. He should have been begging for his life. Instead, he was offering it. Why? In that moment, something shifted inside her. Her people thought humans were weak, but this human radiated a strength that was not in muscle, not in power, but in spirit. It was raw, unbroken, unyielding, and it called to her. Serenia raised her hand, silencing her guards. "Unchain him," she commanded. The guards froze in shock. My princess, he cannot be trusted. I decide who can be trusted, Serenia said sharply. Her gaze never left Elias. If you lie, human, I will end you myself. Elias smirked again, though his eyes were deadly serious. Fair enough, he said, but if I'm right, princess, then you'll owe me. Serenia stepped closer, her face inches from his. Her voice was low, dangerous. And what is it you want me to owe you, Captain? For a heartbeat. Neither spoke. Then Elias answered quietly, just the truth. A dangereux alliance. The war room was carved from black crystal, its walls alive with shifting maps of stars. Every point of light showed a system in her empire, some glowing strong, others flickering with danger. Princess Serenia stood at the center table, her council gathered like shadows around her. But her eyes kept drifting to the human who now stood, unchained, at her side. Captain Elias Kane, an outsider, an enemy, a fragile being from a young world. And yet he stood taller than most of her generals. Not because of rank, but because of presence. He was unafraid of the Empire's power, and he carried himself like a man who had already survived the worst. The council hissed their disapproval. This is madness, spat Lord Vaker, his scaled hands curling into fists. A human? At your war table? Princess, his kind are barely fit for starflight. Another elder sneered. This creature will betray you at the first chance. He is a liability, not an ally. But Serenia silenced them with a glance. Her voice was sharp as a blade. Enough. He is here because I command it. His knowledge may prove useful, and in war, usefulness matters more than pride. The room fell silent, though the anger in their eyes burned like fire. Elias leaned closer, his voice low, so only she could hear. They don't like me very much, he said dryly. Serenia's lips almost curved into a smile. They don't like me either, Captain. Do not mistake obedience for loyalty. For a moment, their eyes met, two leaders surrounded by doubters. And in that moment, something unspoken passed between them. The star map shifted, showing the incoming enemy fleet. Dozens of ships, armed and merciless, closing in on her colony worlds. Serenia's generals argued over strategy. Pull back to the core systems, one barked. No, strike first before they mass their forces, another shouted. The war room dissolved into chaos, voices clashing, pride drowning reason. Elias finally spoke, cutting through the noise. You're all thinking like emperors, not soldiers. Every head turned, fury flashing in their eyes at his interruption. But Elias didn't flinch. If you pull back, you lose the colonies. If you charge, you get slaughtered. That's not strategy, that's suicide. Then what do you suggest, human? Vaker growled. Elias stepped forward, his finger tracing across the star map. These raiders, they're not disciplined. They attack for shock, for chaos. You can't fight them head on. You have to bleed them, make them scatter. He tapped a narrow corridor of stars. This pass, force them through here. Control the bottleneck. Small ships, fast strikes. You cut them down piece by piece until they break. The council erupted again. Impossible. Foolish. This human knows nothing of galactic warfare. But Serenia watched the map with narrowing eyes. His plan was bold, risky, yet elegant. It was not the strategy of an empire, but of a survivor. The kind of thinking she had not heard from her generals in years. Explain, she commanded, her voice calm. Elias met her gaze, steady as always. You've been fighting them like an empire. That's why they keep winning. But I fought them like a man with nothing left to lose. And I'm still alive. The raw honesty in his voice struck something deep in her. He was not boasting, he was not begging. He was simply telling the truth. Serenia turned to her council. You fear his humanity, she said coldly. But perhaps that is what makes him dangerous, not weak. Her words silenced the room, though anger smoldered in the shadows. At last, she turned back to Elias. Very well, Captain. You will lead a strike team. But know this, if you fail me, I will end you myself. Elias gave a faint grin. Fair enough. Just don't get in my way. The council gasped at his insolence. But Serenia's eyes glittered with something that even she did not fully understand. Not anger, not pride, but the spark of respect. Perhaps even trust. That night, in the solitude of her private chamber, Serenia stood before the star map once more. She should have been thinking of battle, of strategy, of survival. But instead her thoughts circled back to the human. His voice, his defiance, his strange way of seeing the galaxy. No one had spoken to her like that in years. Not as a ruler, not as a symbol, but as a person. She pressed her hand to her belly, as she often did when she was alone. The old ache of the curse returned, sharp and heavy. But now, for the first time in years, a whisper of doubt touched the certainty she had always carried. The human had looked at her as though she was not broken, as though she was more than her curse. And for a fleeting moment, Serenia allowed herself a dangerous thought. What if he is right? Secrets revealed. The battle plan worked. The raiders who had once torn through her colonies like fire now found themselves trapped in the narrow star pass. Small Varan ships struck like daggers, guided by Elias's strategy. Piece by piece, the enemy fleet broke apart. For the first time in months, Serenia's empire breathed again. In the great hall, her council praised her brilliance. They cheered the princess's wisdom, never daring to admit it was the human's plan that saved them. Serenia accepted their words with the same calm mask she always wore. But inside, she thought only of Elias Kane, the man who had turned defeat into victory, the man who spoke to her as though she were not untouchable, not cursed, but simply herself. Later that night, she summoned him to the quiet gardens of the palace. It was a place few ever saw, where glowing trees bent low over silver water and the air hummed with ancient songs. Elias entered cautiously, his steps crunching over the soft glass sand path. "Strange place for a meeting," he said, his voice low. Serenia stood near the fountain, her violet eyes reflecting the starlight. "Sometimes," she said softly, "a queen must step away from her throne if she wishes to hear the truth." For a moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the sound of the water. Elias crossed his arms, studying her. "You didn't bring guards," he said. "That's either very brave or very foolish." "Perhaps both," Serenia replied, her voice sharper than she intended. But then her tone softened. "You could have escaped. During the battle, you had chances, and yet you stayed." Elias shrugged. "Running doesn't win wars. Besides, I gave you my word." His words struck deeper than she expected. In her world, promises were tools, twisted and broken by politics. But when he said it, it felt unshakable. For a long moment, she simply watched him, this fragile creature of flesh and bone who stood taller than the lords of her empire. "Why do you look at me like that?" Elias finally asked, his tone half curious, half challenging. Serenia turned her face away, her chest tightening, because no one had ever looked at her the way he did. Not as a cursed princess, not as a throne to be taken, but as a woman. She drew a breath, steadying herself. "There is something you do not know. Human," she began, her voice low. Elias's expression shifted, guarded but patient. "I was told since I was young that I cannot give life." Her hand touched her stomach unconsciously. "That no child will ever come from me. To my people, this is not just misfortune, it is failure. They whisper that I am cursed." The words hung heavy in the garden. For years, she had locked them away. She had never spoken them aloud to anyone, not even to her council. But now she found herself saying them to a man she had known only weeks. Why? She could not answer. Elias was silent for a long time, his face unreadable. At last, he stepped closer, his voice quiet but firm. "Who told you that?" Her eyes narrowed. "The physicians. The elders. They tested me, examined me. Their verdict was final. And you just believe them?" Elias's tone carried no mockery, only raw disbelief. Serenia's jaw tightened. "They're the greatest minds of my empire. Should I have doubted them?" "Yes," Elias said simply. The single word struck her harder than any insult. She turned, glaring, "You dare." But Elias did not flinch. "Where I come from," he said steadily, "doctors make mistakes. Tests fail. People are told they'll never walk, never live, never have children. Then they prove everyone wrong." Her breath caught. The way he said it was not theory, not a story. It was experience. Serenia studied him, searching his face. "You speak as if you know this truth," she said. Elias's eyes darkened. "My sister was told she'd never survive past 20. She lived to 35, long enough to see her son born, long enough to prove them wrong, because she refused to accept someone else's verdict on her life." The words cut into her heart like lightning. All her life, she had carried the weight of the curse as fact. But this human spoke as though the curse was nothing but chains of belief, chains she had allowed to bind her. For the first time in years, Serenia felt tears sting her eyes. Quickly, she turned away, ashamed. A princess did not cry. A queen did not break. But Elias's voice followed softly. "You're not broken, Serenia. Maybe the problem isn't you. Maybe it's what they wanted you to believe." Her name, spoken without title, without fear. Her heart raced at the sound. It was dangerous, forbidden, but she let it linger. For the first time, Serenia felt the foundation of her curse begin to tremble. What if everything she believed was a lie? What if this human, this fragile, reckless man, was the first to show her the truth? She turned back to him, her voice barely a whisper. "And if you are wrong, Captain? If my curse is real?" Elias met her gaze, steady as always. "Then at least you'll know you fought it. And if I'm right, then you'll finally be free." The night wind stirred the glowing trees. And for the first time in her life, Princess Serenia felt the smallest spark of hope. A hope born not from her empire, not from her gods, but from a human who refused to see her as cursed. The betrayal. The throne hall was alive with golden light. The banners of the empire hung high, each one shimmering with the sigils of 1,000 conquered worlds. Princess Serenia stood tall before her council, her victory over the raiders fresh and shining. Her empire cheered, her fleets sang her name across the stars. But in the shadows, envy twisted like a blade. Lord Vaker watched her from below, his scaled lips curled into a thin smile. He had hated the human's presence from the start. He had hated the way Serenia's eyes softened whenever Elias spoke. And most of all, he had hated the whispers spreading through the court, that the fragile human had saved them where the generals had failed. Vaker was patient, and patience was poison. He waited until her triumph was at its highest peak. Then he struck. "My princess." His voice rang across the chamber, smooth as silk. "There's a matter we must discuss. A truth your people deserve to know." The council stirred, uneasy. Serenia's violet eyes narrowed. "What truth do you speak of, Lord Vaker?" Vaker stepped forward, his claws glinting in the light. "It is not victory that concerns me, but legacy. For how long can an empire survive with a ruler who cannot give it an heir?" The words slammed into the hall like thunder. Gasps echoed across the chamber. The courtiers turned, whispers rising like a storm. Some froze in shock, others nodded knowingly because they had always suspected, always whispered in private. But now it was spoken aloud. The secret Serenia had carried all her life was bleeding in front of her people. Her chest tightened, her throat burned, but she forced her face to remain stone. "You dare," she said, her voice calm but shaking beneath the surface. Vaker bowed mockingly. "I dare only to speak what you hide. You cannot give us an heir. You cannot secure our future. You are barren." The word cut sharper than any blade. Around her, the council erupted, voices clashing like fire. "Is it true? How can she rule us if her line dies with her? The empire will crumble without succession." Serenia's hands trembled behind her back. All her years of control, all her walls of steel, crumbled in an instant. The curse she had confessed only to Elias was now a weapon in her enemy's hand. And it was working. Elias stepped forward before he could stop himself. "Enough," His voice cracked like a gunshot. The hall fell silent, every eye turning to the human. Vaker's grin widened. And here he is, the outsider, the parasite who whispers poison in our princess's ear. He raised a clawed hand, pointing at Elias. Do you not see? He is the one who twists her mind. He is the one who fills her head with lies, telling her she is not cursed, when we all know the truth. Elias did not back down. He met Vaker's eyes with cold fire. She is not cursed, he said firmly, his voice carrying through the chamber. Your so-called truth is built on fear and control. You call her barren because it keeps her in chains. But I've seen her strength, her spirit. And I'll tell you this, your empire doesn't deserve her if you see her only as a womb. The hall gasped, outrage exploding. To speak so in the throne hall was madness. Guards rushed forward, blades drawn. Seize him, Vaker barked. But Serena raised her hand. Stand down, she ordered, her voice sharp as lightning. The guards froze, trembling, torn between duty and fear. Her eyes locked onto Vaker. You think to shame me? You think to use my pain as your weapon? Her voice was low, trembling with fury. I have ruled without an heir. I have defended this empire while your tongue wagged in shadows. And I will continue to do so until my last breath. But even as she spoke, doubt cracked her heart. The whispers had spread. The council's eyes were heavy with suspicion. And worst of all, Elias now stood accused beside her. If she defended him too strongly, they would call her weak, bewitched by a human. If she abandoned him, she would lose the only soul who had ever spoken truth to her. For the first time in her reign, Serena felt trapped. The curse was no longer only her burden. It was the Empire's weapon. And Elias, the man who had given her hope, was now painted as the serpent in her garden. Vaker bowed low, his smile venomous. The Empire will decide, princess. But remember this, the stars care nothing for hope. Only blood builds empires. Serena stood frozen, her fury hidden behind her mask. Elias stepped closer, his voice low, meant only for her. They're afraid, Serena. That's why they lash out. You can't let them break you now. Her eyes met his, and for the first time, she felt the full weight of the bond between them. But in her chest, a whisper of fear echoed. What if Vaker was right? What if the Empire would never follow a ruler who could not give them an heir? That night, alone in her chamber, Serena pressed her forehead against the glass window, staring at the endless stars. Her hands trembled, her heart burned. The betrayal had been swift and merciless. And though Elias's words had defended her, they had also placed him in danger. Her enemies would strike at him now, and, through him, at her. The curse had always been her prison, but now it was becoming a battlefield. And Serena knew, the war for her empire was no longer only against fleets and raiders. It was against the whispers of her own people, and the only one who believed in her was a human. The miracle, the empire burned. Rebel fleets struck again and again, emboldened by Vaker's words. Across the stars, whispers spread. The princess cannot give us an heir. The throne is doomed. Her people's faith wavered. Her enemies grew bold. And through it all, Elias Cain remained at her side, unbroken, unafraid. But his presence made the council restless. Every glance, every whisper carried poison. The human has bewitched her, they said. She listens to him more than her own blood. Serena ignored them, but the weight grew heavier. And deep inside, the words clawed at her. What they are right. One night, after a skirmish on the edge of her empire, Serena stood in the medical chamber. The battle had been brutal, and Elias had nearly been killed. He lay on a recovery bed, his chest wrapped in strange, glowing bandages. But his eyes were open, sharp and steady. You should rest, Serena said, her voice softer than she intended. Elias gave a faint grin, says the woman who hasn't slept in 3 days. For a moment, the walls of empire and duty fell away. It was just a man and a woman, a soldier and a princess, and she allowed herself the dangerous comfort of being near him. But then, as the healers examined his wounds, something unexpected happened. Their instruments flickered, confused. The readings showed patterns they had never seen before. Elias's blood was strange, resilient, carrying signals unlike any Varen physiology. The healers whispered, "Impossible, his cells regenerate differently, more adaptive, more fertile." Serenia frowned. "What does this mean?" The chief healer hesitated, bowing low. "Princess, when your body comes near his, your own patterns shift. The readings change." "What?" Serenia's heart raced. The healer stammered, "Forgive me, but we have always believed your condition permanent. Yet, your proximity to this human alters the results. It is as if your body awakens." The words struck like lightning. Serenia's breath caught, her chest tightening. For years, she had lived under the certainty of her curse. For years, she had believed herself barren. But now, the evidence glowed on the healer's instruments. Around Elias Kane, her body was not the same. She dismissed the healers with a sharp gesture. When they left, she turned to Elias. He was watching her, his expression unreadable. "Well," he said finally, "that explains a lot." Her voice shook. "You knew." Elias shook his head. "Not knew. Just hoped. I told you before, people aren't machines. Doctors can be wrong. Sometimes the impossible just needs the right spark." Serenia's knees nearly gave way. She gripped the edge of the bed, her mind spinning. Her entire life had been built on chains of shame. Chains forged by lies, by manipulation, by fear. And now, with one human's presence, those chains began to crack. Elias reached out, his rough hand covering hers. "You are not cursed, Serenia. You were never cursed. You were lied to, because fear keeps rulers weak." His words pierced her deeper than any blade. She wanted to deny it, to hold on to the certainty of her curse. But the truth was glowing right in front of her, undeniable. For a long moment, she simply stared at him, her eyes burning. "What if it is true?" she whispered. "What if everything I believed was a lie?" Elias squeezed her hand. "Then you fight the lie, and you prove them all wrong." Her heart raced, her breath shallow. The world around her blurred until there was only him, the human who had defied her counsel, who had given her hope, who had stood against the galaxy itself just to tell her she was not broken. The human whose very presence stirred life where she thought there was none. Outside the chamber, alarms blared. The rebels had struck again. The war raged on. The Empire trembled. But in that small, quiet space, something greater than war was born. Not just strategy, not just survival, but the spark of a miracle. That night, Serenia stood alone at her window. Her hand pressed to her stomach. For the first time in her life, she did not feel emptiness. She felt possibility, a dangerous, fragile, beautiful possibility. Her curse was crumbling. Her enemies were rising. And in the center of it all was a human, a man who had proven her wrong. The Empire thought Elias Kane was nothing. But to her, he had become everything, the new future. The throne hall was no longer a place of whispers. It was a place of fire, of judgment, of destiny. The banners of the Empire swayed high above, but the air was heavy with doubt. The council sat in rows of stone, their faces carved in suspicion. And before them stood Princess Serenia, alone, unshaken, her violet eyes burning brighter than the stars. Behind her, Elias Kane walked forward, the human whose name was now spoken in every corner of the Empire. Some called him savior, others called him poison, but none could deny the truth. He had changed everything. Lord Vaker stepped forward, his voice cold and sharp. "Your Highness, the Empire demands certainty. The people say you are cursed, that you cannot give us an heir, that your throne is doomed to die with you. Will you deny it before us all?" The words were meant to cut her, but Serenia did not flinch. For the first time in her life, the weight of the curse did not press down on her shoulders. She stood taller, her voice like steel wrapped in silk. "No, I will not deny it. I will not bow to your whispers. Yes, I was told I could never give life. Yes, I carried that burden in silence. But now, I know the truth. Gasps spread through the chamber. The council leaned forward, their eyes sharp. "What truth?" one demanded. Serenia raised her chin, her voice ringing clear. "The truth that I was lied to. That my curse was a chain forged by fear, not by fate. And it was not you, not your physicians, not your lords who showed me this." Her gaze shifted to Elias. It was a human. The chamber erupted into chaos, voices clashing, fury and disbelief filling the air. But Serenia raised her hand, and silence fell like a blade. "You call them fragile. You call them lesser. Yet it was this human who stood when your armies faltered. It was this human who saw strength where you saw weakness. And it was this human who proved that I am not broken." Her words struck like thunder. Even those who hated her felt their certainty tremble. Elias stood silent beside her, but his steady presence spoke louder than any speech. He was living proof, living defiance against their lies. Vaker hissed, his fury spilling. "You would betray your own kind for him? You would place your faith in a creature of dirt and bone?" Serenia's eyes narrowed, sharp as blades. "I would place my faith where it is earned, and he has earned more than any of you ever did." The silence that followed was heavy. The council could not answer, for deep down, even they knew the truth of her words. That night, the stars burned brighter than before. News spread across the empire. The princess was not cursed. The human had saved them. And together, they were forging something new. Not just survival, not just hope, but a future. In the quiet of her private chamber, Serenia stood by the window. Elias was at her side, his arms crossed, his eyes on the endless black sky. "You didn't have to do that," he said softly. "You could have kept your secret. They would have kept following you out of fear." Serenia shook her head. "Fear is not the future. Not anymore." Her hand brushed against her stomach, the thought still fragile, still unbelievable, but no longer impossible. Elias turned to her, his face serious. "So what now, princess?" She looked at him, her eyes softening. "Now, we rebuild. We fight. We prove to them that destiny is not written by curses or bloodlines, but by choice." He gave a small grin, the kind that made her chest tighten. "Sounds like a human idea." "Perhaps," she said, her voice warm for the first time in years. "Or perhaps it is simply our idea. Beyond the palace walls, the empire was still restless. Enemies still circled, rebels still whispered. But for the first time, Serenia did not feel alone. She felt stronger, brighter, alive. Because beside her stood a human who had seen her not as cursed, not as broken, but as whole. The stars stretched endless before them. And in their light, Serenia saw a future her people had never imagined. A future where the empire would not fall into silence. A future where a human and a princess would rewrite the laws of destiny. The cursed princess was no more. In her place stood a queen, and beside her, the man who had proven her wrong. Together, they would forge a legacy not built on fear, but on hope. And the galaxy would never be the same again.